Do you really want to know, Sharon?
No, it's still catchy. It's still
I know.
catchy.
It is. Yes.
Well, hello. Welcome again to the Project Failure Files. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another weekly episode of our series where Sharon and I will explore what not to do as you manage projects.
This series is for anyone and everyone who finds themselves managing projects or doing anything like that. In each episode, we're going to talk about common pitfalls in project management, share personal stories and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices that helps you be successful.
And our approach for the series is a little bit different. So we talk a lot about what not to do in project management, discussing theory as well as sharing practical examples and best practices.
For this episode, our topic is avoiding preventative measures, building a resilient framework, which is a fundamental aspect of being a project manager.
Well, I love that because there are PMs, we've all worked with them that do avoid the framework. They avoid the process. They want to go and shoot from the hip. And so we got some stories to share here. So, and each week, each episode, we do start off by defining and outlining the topic. We share, of course, personal stories and examples. Our goal is to help you understand the scope of the issue. It's not always confined to that one sentence. And so we then from there share practical solutions, actionable strategies to help you improve your project management skills.
And of course, we also cover the cultural issues of each topic because lasting change requires that you understand and address your organization's cultural dynamics.
And company culture, it really does permeate every topic that we discuss here. But we get into those preventive measures as well. It's a lot to cover in 30 to 40-ish minutes. And we try to have them jam-packed with information.
Yeah, there's always a lot to cover. So let's kick things off and start talking about avoiding preventative measures and building a resilient framework.
Of course, please feel free to comment throughout the episodes. I'll share out the social links. You can follow us over, come participate in our community group out on Facebook and share those experiences, share those horror stories, and any great examples as we go through this topic that we may have missed.
So while you were preparing for this topic, did you have any stories or experiences that just jumped out at you?
Well, I was thinking about this and I'm sure you're exactly the same. We've been in IT about the same time. It's over 30 years now. And you can't be in these kinds of roles for 30 plus years and not have stories to tell. But I was thinking about kind of simplifying this down to kind of a common mistake. I made this mistake. I'm sure you made the mistake. I mean, I made it multiple times until I learned. But is that where I thought it was a small, quick project that I didn't need to follow the methodology. I didn't follow my own rules, or I was talked into it by a manager like, hey, this is something that we can kind of do like in parallel with the other projects. So I didn't follow the framework. I didn't do the risk mitigation around it. I didn't do some of the reporting mechanisms of that. And then what inevitably happened is the scope grew. Then that manager who asked me to do something outside of the framework, the system, is like, well, why didn't you ask those questions? Why didn't you have those pieces in your plan around that? So yeah, it was one of those things where I learned as CYA over time, covering my assets, was to always follow the framework. Doesn't mean you need to include every step, ask every question in there, but that it adheres to that framework. So there's visibility. So my manager, and then when I could see what was going on. Later on, I learned this lesson when I was building PMOs and managing teams of engineers and analysts and project managers and business analysts, that I saw them getting pulled sideways by clients, by internal clients, and said, like, we will follow the framework so that we don't get caught. The organization needs to have a clear picture of what's actually happening on the ground. And when you avoid that framework, it skews the perspective. People think you have more bandwidth than you really have as a PM. And so you want to show them the reality of what's happening with the projects.
Let me guess, like my husband says, your POCs became production. And then the next thing you know is you're supporting a POC for the rest of your life.
Yeah. It's funny. And Sharon and I both come from the SharePoint world and that community. I did my first SharePoint deployment back in 2005, went to work for Microsoft a year later. It's funny. And I always like to share this, that I tried to convince the customer back then not to go with SharePoint, and much more expensive tools, but were more functional. But I kind of caught the bug, saw where the industry was going, and ended up going to work for Microsoft and working on SharePoint deployments. But so much of that, how SharePoint grew in the early days was it was that SharePoint was a shadow IT initiative.
100%.
Somebody went and installed it on a server, the old WSS, installed it on a server below their desk, started building reports and doing other things with that. And then some executives saw that and be like, I really like that. Give that to everybody. And it kind of grew from there. Not in every case, just most cases. It grew like that.
We've seen that with Excel. We've seen it with Access. We see it with SharePoint. I've seen it, now Power Platform coming in, we talk a lot about governance and I'm going to set the bar right now. I'm going to set the expectation. We're not saying that quick wins and quick solutions are a bad thing.
Nope.
What we're saying is it's so easy to have a quick solution that turns into a long-term solution, that it's easy to see how when you're managing something and you're not prepared for what's going to come out of it, that, it's that idea of understanding this little quick thing that's happening may turn into a longer thing that you're just not seeing yet.
And I think long-term too, let's look at this selfishly, our own careers. If you are approaching every problem with that structured approach, doesn't matter the size of it. If you have that structured approach, you're actually going to build more trust. Individuals will look at you and say that, hey, large or small, Sharon approaches every project in this way. I know exactly she's asking those questions. Again, you may mark off on your, not that we're using a physical form for it, but NA, not applicable. This you may go through the list, your checklist of things, but you've adhered to that process, because where it comes into play, if you're not doing the review, the risk management around it, that you're not asking those core questions. Again, it could be a small project that takes just a few days and a few engineering hours and a side project to do. Right.
A few hours.
Quickly, that thing will escalate into a full-blown project. If you're doing nothing more, like if you go in, I know it's more of a, PMs don't use it as much as like MBAs do, but doing like a SWOT analysis and really understanding the scope of a project. I mean, it's really easy to see where there are risks in any project of any size, which could escalate and turn it into a full-blown project. And then you get bitten by that if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah. Number one risk, this POC would not perform as a long-term production solution.
You can say that to your heart's content. It doesn't matter, Sharon. It just takes it. We always joke about like the CEO who or CIO that read an in-flight magazine about some new thing and gets back off the flight. I want this thing. So if they see those features, even if it's a POC, they're like, yes. And salespeople too. Like we always working for product companies, you don't show most of your salespeople anything that you're developing, because then it gets in their head and they start selling what is not yet actually real.
Yeah, we could totally do that. Can you make me this? 100% we can make this. I mean, I truly do believe that, you can make anything with enough time and money. You can. Yeah. What the problem is that oftentimes, people don't understand that. And to your point with rigor and with, being preventative, and understanding, what are we following? How do people know what the expectation is? oftentimes it's easy to sell somebody on, oh yeah, we got that. And then their minds, they think, oh, that's quick and easy. But the truth of the matter is, no, it's not quick and easy. It's long and it's difficult and it's complex and it's expensive. Can we do it 100%? But is it going to be within your budget and time frame? Maybe not.
When you think about the rigors of project management, what is that framework? What are the kind of the basic things that you think of that must be in place?
It's almost like there's been some places that have already defined this. Because I mean, the big ones obviously are budget, scope, and time, right? So can I get it done in the time that I need it? Can I get what I need done? And can I get it in the cost that I can afford? I'm sure, when we talk about this, there's a lot of other things that are going to fall out of it. But when we talk about project management tenets, those are the three primary basic ones that we want to go after. And as we all well know, you can usually get one or two, but it's very difficult to get all three.
But if you have that structure, if you've got a framework, and as Sharon and I always say, like, you utilize the methodology. You don't care what the methodology is. There's things that are out there. There's various versions of flavors of Agile. There's the waterfall method. There's the Prince 2. There's like all of these different methodologies that are out there, but have that core. And it's probably already defined within the organization. Or if you're working for a client or your organization that's not that mature around their project management infrastructure, again, go leverage the best practices. The point is, have a framework. From that, as you're thinking about time, budget, personnel around that thing, you also then need to be thinking of like, well, then what are the risks to other projects and the time, budget, and personnel in those other projects. And then the other things that I think about too are that, like, on top of that are so have the framework, do the risk assessment. That's an ongoing activity. Just think that way. Is then to document those things and to communicate that. So like I don't do projects off the books, period. It will not go well for you. The stakeholder will hand off to you in a negative way. Like if something goes wrong, like don't do that. And then my last piece to that recommendation is then have, as part of that, again, this is more of a PMO function, have those reviews, have those audits. So it should become part of the regular cycle. It's great if a project starts and stops in between your weekly PMO reviews and say, this is what happened, this is what it was, this is the scope, here's this documented, these risks that happened, they didn't happen, but here it all is. Here's the story.
And I think since we're talking about what not to do, and I just love bringing this back up because it's fun, if your methodology includes things like terms like cowboy coding, just in time, or we take the parts that we like and make the things we want to do, I think that maybe you should make sure that you understand what your rigor is, because once again, we don't care what methodology you're using, but if you have affectionate terms for things, or you say to people, oh, we don't have to write that down because, or we don't track that information because, you might want to take a second look at whether or not you're actually truly being proactive and preventative, or whether you're doing the other side, which is simply reactive work. And reactive work in and of itself, with no rigor, no methodology, no structure, is just simply doing things for the sake of doing things. And you're going to find that over time, you're going to struggle and you're going to have problems and you're going to have lots and lots of risk and lots of failure.
Well, it's just a very chaotic environment. Again, if you do something and it is successful, why was it successful? Was it documented around the way? Like, how can you repeat that success? You have a greater chance of repeating success if you have that framework and follow the steps. And that's ultimately, I've been in PM roles most of my career, but I'm a marketer at heart, and I look at that, like, to go in, package these things up. But how do I understand, like, what can we do to better sell the fact that we're good at this thing? It's like, well, as we understand where our strengths are in the process, like we might be good at imagineering of what we could go and do. And hey, it's a strong skill set to go and envision the future and get people sold and excited about that. But then if you fail at the organization, you've got some great engineers at the end of that. But that chaos, you're more likely to burn out the engineers on the back end and never be able to go and deliver. So I'm always thinking of sales and marketing alignment. How do we make sure that folks are on board? How do we make sure all the stakeholders feel like it's understood what they're trying to get out of it, and that what we're delivering is actually achieving those goals? You can't do that. And so if you don't have visibility, if you don't have communication, if you don't have that structure, all of which is part of that framework.
Well, yeah, and what happens if somebody wins the lottery or has a baby and takes parental
Come on,
leave?
you have to use the version that we all talk about. Is hit by a bus.
I like to be kinder to my hypothetical people who leave.
Why are these buses out there hitting all of our technical folk all the time? Like, that's something there should be legislation. Come on.
So when they leave on good terms, for good reasons, like an extended holiday or a new baby or all kinds of good things that can happen in their lives, how do we reproduce the same success? So as a project manager, you're trying to work with your team to do this. And it doesn't matter if it's you that is the lucky one for the month-long vacation or if it's somebody on your team. But processes not only help us eliminate risk like overall, but they also help us maintain consistency. And so if something is, changed in the dynamics of your team for some reason, what this really does is it allows somebody to step out for a little while and your team can continue to be successful. Your projects continue to be successful. Things around you continue to be successful. So don't discount the idea that a really well-laid system or process can then be repeatable, no matter really who is in that role.
Yeah, when I think about this too, is that culture is such a big factor in this, and obviously
Mhm.
there are some organizations that are just more reactive, and you have to then look at why is the organization more reactive? Is it because of the leadership style? Is it because of the
High turnover.
right, then the culture of the team, of your peers that are surrounded you? And so, I mean, you need to look at that. I mean, ideally, those can be true, yet you can still encourage feedback, encourage self-reflection around those things. There's things that you can do, that you can be a leader around this. And I would say that the best teacher is to lead by example, to always follow that framework. And maybe you get some of these leaders that come to you and make requests, and when you insist, like, no, we're going to follow the structure, and here's the steps. You're not talking about adding bureaucracy to it.
Mhm.
You're just talking about in a structured approach to that. When people understand the framework, when they understand the governance model around projects, then they begin to trust that. They see the results of that, and then they start applying that framework. It's they're when you provide an answer of the scope of the project, of the budget, of the personnel needs, you'll be taken more seriously because they know it's like, okay, well, Sharon gave me this. I know that she follows this rigorous model. And so I have more trust in Sharon's than some other PM that's winging it.
Yeah, I like to use a lot of analogies around in psychology, and we talk a lot about like parenting, and we talk a lot about leadership and the way that people do things. And one of the things as humans is we understand that each person acts differently. We understand that each person has different habits and different expectations and different ways we deal with things. And if you think back as a child, and the whole kind of fun of if mom and dad do things differently, sometimes you can play them against each other. And that's a real natural thing that happens, is that kids figure out, oh, one of my parents is a little more passive. And so if I get in trouble, I'm going to go to this parent. And if I want something, I'm going to go to a different parent. And we do this in work too. I think, we don't think about this, but if you're the type of project manager that is really consistent about things, then people are going to follow up on tasks more often. They're going to fill out tickets more often. They're going to hit their deadlines more often. They're going to do things that they're supposed to do. And, just like in parenting, where we talk about being a good parent and holding your kids accountable and making sure that they're doing their things, as a project manager, while we're not there to parent our team members, and I know sometimes people talk about that a lot. I'm like, oh, I'm not their parent. I'm not here to tell them what to do. The more consistent we can be in expectations and the more consistent we do things, the more our team members know, if I don't do this, this is what's going to happen. If I do this, this is what's going to happen. And I feel like to some degree, it lowers the stress level for the team because they know what to expect and they know that they can just do their job, get it done, and we're all going to work together.
Sharon, I have a great example of this, and we were talking about this earlier this morning.
Oh, yes.
Because you're exactly the same way. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. So what people have come to understand over time is, if I want to spend this time with Christian, then I will go and do a calendar invite and make sure that he's available. It's on a schedule. And I look at my calendar, and I always say this because the way that I use calendaring, and this is just an example of a framework for meeting with me one-on-one, is that if I have personal time that I'm taking, or I've got time blocked out to work, like I'll block it out on my calendar. Therefore, if there's an opening and you need to meet with me, you can take it. Like, you don't need to come ask for my permission. Again, that's the framework. That's a lot what we're talking about. It's the same model, that you have a framework in place. When people understand, oh, I can do all these things that I need to do. I can do things quickly on the fly. I can be reactive to creating a project in there. But once it's in that project mechanism, there's a basic framework there that people can see. It's transparent. They know they have certain expectations around what we can go and do next from that. And I was thinking about this, and I jotted down a couple of bullets here because you're really talking about changing the culture of the organization. Whether you think that they're going to push back on that, or you think that the organizational culture is accepting of, hey, this is a new way. Maybe you're brought in as a project manager to lead, to take that experience and help them develop that methodology. Three things I think are core. One, encouraging that feedback, having those feedback mechanisms, what that might look like. So that's the strategy. You want to foster an environment where feedback is welcome, it's acted upon, it's valued as part of the process. So if you have regular meetings where you discuss like what went well on a project, the postmortem model, but also where that you have a project like having led PMOs, shared services teams, where we sit down and we go through, here's all the active projects, here's the new requests, like give everybody visibility into that. And from that, it allows us to be open about and honest about, look, I'm overburdened. I'm like, this is much bigger than it appears. I don't have the bandwidth for that. And so you have that, and it's a constantly changing thing. So for me, it was always at least a weekly activity plus one-on-ones with people. The second thing you can do organizationally, so one, have that project review, that cadence. Second is training and development of tools and skills. Like, this is a continuous process. Learning and development doesn't end like, oh, I've been trained on how to go use that tool one time. Great. Years later, you take another class and you're supposed to be an expert on that. No, you want to provide access to training programs. There's so much free that is out there. But to track those things, like I used to always pay for in the organizations where I had the budget that I had control of, and I would send my PMs, I would pay for Project Management Institute PMP certifications. I would help with that program. If you don't have the budget for that, there's tons of free resources that are out there, but encourage people to stay updated on the skills, the best practices, the emerging trends, all those kinds of things. And then you'll see, will they start to incorporate those things into their work? And it what is it? A rising tide floats all boats. We all get better at that. And then the third thing is celebrate the successes and learn from your failures. So I love the postmortem. You need to not just talk about the project, but you also need to review maybe part of those weekly reviews or on a quarterly leadership discussion of the framework, of the methodology itself. What are we missing? What are we lacking? Is this providing enough on the communication? Do we need more over here? Do we need to strengthen what we're doing around budget discussions? Strengthen the overall methodology, but then talk about, like, we nailed this. We did very well on this. I know we're going to talk about in other episodes. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make is when you change the scope constantly, it diminishes the PM's ability to go and achieve. Like, we agreed on it. I was managing to the plan of record. I'm executing on, I'm meeting or exceeding on all the metrics. And then a leader comes in and changes the scope of that and then penalizes that PM and the team for not being able to turn on a dime around that new scope, like all that. It's just, it's BS. That's it. Yeah. You want to damage your relationship with your PMs. It's like not adhering to your own framework. Change is part of the framework, or it should be.
Flexibility.
You need to have flexibility within that, but you need to adhere to that model so that people have trust within that process, within that framework.
Yeah, 100% agree. Well, and I think, a big piece that comes with that when we talk about the cultural piece of this is having a framework allows you to know when you start, what you're doing, who's doing what, and when you're done. And I think this is a big, this Agile speaks a lot about this. And I'm not favoring Agile over anything else, but I do think one of the strong things they do is talk about doneness. When is it done? How do I know that I'm done with this particular thing? Because I think sometimes if we're just doing things, we do. There's never a done point. And I think it's very important, especially as humans, for us to understand, I started something, I did something, and I completed something, even if it's a piece or a part of a bigger whole. The idea of knowing that we're done with something, to your point of being able to celebrate our wins. How do we know that we've completed something that matters if we don't know when we started, what we did, and when we were done? So having those preventative measures in place helps us know that. What to not do, just do things all the time and never understand the scope of, starting something, doing something, and finishing something, because then you'll just, be forever working and never really have any segmentation to what you're doing.
I think of a lot of organizations that pay lip service to the using data-driven decision making, for example. How can you measure something and get data around that if you're not following a repeatable framework? Again, it doesn't mean that you're not constantly improving the framework. It doesn't mean you can't adjust that and fine tune that. But again, you need to get data out of the system, whether we know that we're not as successful at the beginning of a project, in the middle, or at the end, how we close things out. You can't then make a reasonable change if you don't have that baseline of activities and are tracking the behaviors of those projects. And it comes back to that repeatable process. And I know a lot of organizations get hung up on that. Again, this idea, as I mentioned earlier, that this is a bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. You need to be flexible. You need to be like we always say, that when I would send my direct reports through, PMI training courses, and I would say, look, when you come back, like I don't want you to attempt to apply the entire PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge, like that, all of that knowledge to any single project. Use what is relevant, what makes sense. Follow our framework. And if we can make the framework more efficient, let's have that conversation. You need to be able to prioritize the asks that are out there. You need to gather data around that thing, but be flexible, especially with those, what could be initially that lightweight project. But be prepared for it to go wrong.
No, I was thinking about, this in terms of, so that the buzzy topic right now is AI, if you've noticed.
I've heard that. Yes.
There's a few people talking about AI right now. And I think about, so what you're talking about is this, not paying attention to what's happening, just doing the things that you're doing. And there's a big discussion right now about AI and automation. And so I think about, if you do it to a point you can automate all of that, it's fantastic. And here's the big but. If you set all of that stuff on auto and you never looked at it, you never checked it, you never audited it, you never fixed it, you were never flexible in that, like, what would happen? You'd have a whole bunch of stuff that's done. You would have a ton of work that's done, but completely wrong. And I think it's no different in exactly what you're saying in that process is, if you do things, but you don't stop to pay attention to what is it that we're doing and are we even doing the right thing, you're going to have a whole bunch of work, but it's wrong.
It's so akin to, I mean, the push towards agile methodologies is the idea that, look, if we're gonna go out and we're going to try this, we're going to try to deliver fewer features but faster. I've used software development as an example, so that we can learn quickly, fail fast, and then learn from that and improve on that. Versus the in the olden days of the waterfall method, but where I worked on a project that was the longest single project that I worked on from beginning to end was over 18 months. And it was a data center consolidation, a massive project when I worked for Pacific Bell years ago. Everything else has been much more dynamic, has been more flexible, moving fast. Like we delivered and within the budget and like all those things of that massive project. But so much of that was a great experience to learn about change management, to constantly have to adjust and refine that, and yet still delivered on that day where we were consolidating data centers and rolling out new hardware and new applications on that new hardware, all over a single weekend. I mean, a lot of stuff happened, but I mean, the cutover of the data centers was over a weekend window, which I did not sleep much that weekend. But we did it. And so much is because of the framework that we put in place and going through those various steps and with all of the stakeholders that were involved. The more that we can, again, create a culture of that continuous improvement where we're having conversations, we're utilizing the technologies that are out there. Like, I'm a huge proponent of collaboration technology and the sharing of that information. So easy and flexible compared to what we were doing 25, 30 years ago to share that information. And it goes back to, again, if you don't have the framework, what are we automating? What are we learning from? How are we able to leverage the data to make future decisions to improve upon all of this?
Or are we simply generating a lot of junk that has no value to anybody?
Yes. I know that I realize that these topics, like, this is a big thing when you're talking about, if you have a truly resilient framework, the way I interpret that is that it is open to change. It's constantly changing and adjusting. It's a living, breathing thing that you are feeding, you're nurturing, you're grooming, you're taking care of that framework so that it meets your changing needs, because your business is changing, the requirements change, the outside impacts are evolving and changing, your stakeholders are changing, your knowledge of what is possible changes. And so the framework also needs to be a living, breathing thing, but consistent.
100% agree. 100% agree. I think at the end of the day, if I was to say, what are the nuggets in this topic? The nugget is, have something that you follow and do it consistently. And if you're going to change it, communicate those changes and then follow that consistently. And I think you're going to have a lot of bigger wins if you just do the same thing.
And I think that's a good place to wrap for this important topic. And of course, be sure to follow us. You've got our X handles out there, or Twitter, Twix, whatever it is. out there. We also have the Facebook group where it's a community where please you can ask questions, share your experiences. We'd love to be able to have more of our episodes revolve around community questions. So if there's a particular scenario, a problem that you've seen repeatedly that we've not yet covered in a past episode, and where do you find those past episodes? Out on YouTube, of course, they're there. You can find them on LinkedIn. They're out on Facebook as part of the community page. They're all over the place. You can find it if you use the hashtag Project Failure Files, all is one word combined. You'll be able to find that. Lots of great stuff out there. And of course, we'll be back next Monday, every Monday. We're here at the same time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be doing this weekly shows for a while.
Forever, I think, and ever and ever and ever.
And I think, and they go through the holidays, like we'll be there, rain or shine. We might have for the holidays, we'll have a pre-recorded version of it, but it'll run every Monday. So you can take it to the bank.
Speaking of consistency.
Yes. So I think with the current lineup, we're done in February of 2025.
I'm sure we'll come up with plenty more things to do.
Lots of stuff going on. And then beyond that, we've got plans. So please join us, come and provide your feedback. But thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for being here. See you next time.